Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the new Sigma 65mm f2 DG-DN lens. DG means that it's a full-frame lens. DN means it's designed for mirrorless. In this case, for either Leica L or Sony FE mount. And I'm reviewing the Sony FE version, and actually I'm filming on it at the moment using the Sony A9. Give you a little sense of that performance as we proceed through this review. Now, today we're doing the standard review, so I'll get to the details fairly quickly there. And if you want more information, I recommend that you check out my definitive review, which breaks everything down, particularly the image quality, in much greater detail. But if you want a quick review, you're in the right place. The 65mm f2 is a part of what Sigma is identifying as their new I series. That began about a year ago with the 45mm f2.8, which, though we didn't know it at the time, this kind of marketing language is all new. At the time, I just thought of it as a bit of an oddball in that it had a different design, a very nice physical design, very nice build quality, but didn't really fit within the framework of what I was expecting from Sigma lenses at the time. Makes a little bit more sense now that they have this kind of subclass under the Contemporary brand for these I series lenses. And so that was followed up with the 35mm f2 that was announced side by side with the 65mm and released simultaneously. But then also we have, in the month of January 2021 coming up, there is a 24mm f3.5 that will also be coming. The I series is designed for those that really value not just the image quality performance, but also really value a fine, tactile, and mechanically engineered design. And so there is a little bit more care that has gone into them. They're very, very nicely built, everything out of metal, including the lens hood, with a really kind of, retro slash cine aesthetic to them that I personally find very pleasing and also highly functional, with raised aperture and focused rings that look like they're designed for gearing, for example, but just a really, really strong mechanical function to the lens itself. And so that includes that aforementioned aperture ring, which has a lot of precision, 1/3 stop detents, and a nice kind of harder detent between f22, which is minimum aperture, and then you can click over into A, or automatic mode, if you prefer to not manually select an aperture. At this stage, I'm not aware of any option to have them declicked, which is maybe unfortunate. I would have loved to have seen a design, say similar to the Zeiss Loxia series, where you could just, turn a switch and you could switch between clicked and declicked. It would further, of course, help for, for video type work, but that's not the case here. It is focus by wire, thus focus emulation, like all mirrorless lenses, but in this case the emulation is very strong. There is a nice amount of damping. It seems to be fairly linear in operation, and so I give good marks there. We do have a gasket at the lens mount. However, what we don't have is any other kind of internal seals that I've been made aware of. But at least there's a gasket there to give some degree of weather sealing. Also, what we have is a bifurcated approach to the front lens cap, and so there's a traditional plastic, pinch type cap. It also comes with just a flat cap that utilizes magnetism to work with the all metal construction, and so just pops into place. And they also sell an inexpensive lanyard, which you can just pop those lens caps on, that you can wear on a backpack or a jacket or a strap of some kind if you want to utilize it that way. Overall, the build here is really, really beautiful. It's nice and compact, though it does weigh in at a little over 400 grams, or right at around 400 grams, which is a little heavier than you might expect relative to the size. And that is simply because of the, the fact that the lens is all metal and glass, thus weighs a little bit more. But I think it's a worthy trade-off for a beautifully crafted lens that really feels great in the hands and operates very well. Also operating very well is the autofocus. We've got a stepping motor here, but it's a really nicely executed one that gives you near instantaneous focus changes. Very smooth, very quiet, and very accurate. We can see the quietness if we take a look at the video pulls. So as you can see, it is basically no sound in making those focus changes. For those of you that are into video, one negative though that you will have noticed in that is that there is a fair bit of focus breathing. And so it's for those of you whose video work includes a lot of major focus changes and you're concerned about that, that's obviously going to be a factor. Although I have found the lens to be excellent for, recording these kinds of segments, either this or kind of teaching episodes, because it really is a great natural focal length that strikes a nice balance between not being too wide nor being too long. And so you can still work, within a room like this. You can work indoors with a nice framing, but it's also a nice when you go outside. And so I actually like the 65 millimeter focal length for video work. However, if your video work includes those, focus pulls, that might be an issue potentially for you. But overall, IAF worked very well. It worked fine for portraits. It also worked very, very well if I had an animal subject, and I got good accuracy in basically all tested in, situations. And also felt like the lens did a pretty good job of being intuitive in not getting stuck on not selecting like a foreground subject, which can be a case sometimes on Sony. I felt like it did a pretty good job here, however. And I also noted that it was nice and stable for these type of shots without any kind of hunting or unnecessary focusing in and out. And so focus system, I give definitely an A for the execution of what we've got here. Likewise, when it comes to image quality, we have got basically all strengths save one weakness that I will point to. And that is the weakness is that, as you can see here, there is a fair bit of pincushion distortion. It reminds me in that sense of the 85 millimeter f1.4 DN, although it's not quite as heavy as the 85 millimeter is. In this case, to do a manual correction, I needed to input about a -9 compared to a -11 that I needed for the 85 millimeter. That being said, there is enough pincushion distortion there that it will be a factor if you have straight lines, and that may show up, and so it will require some correction, which will happen in camera for JPEGs and or video. However, for RAWs, right now there isn't yet a profile. Hopefully that will come sooner rather than later, and obviously that simplifies your manual corrections. There's only a little bit of vignette, just a tiny bit over a stop in the corners, not really a factor at all. Likewise, I found that aberrations were well controlled. No issue that I saw in the field for either longitudinal nor lateral chromatic aberrations, and so high marks in that regard. Also high marks when it comes to image sharpness. From f2 on, f2 is not necessarily a large maximum aperture, but what we have got here is a near perfect performance from f2 on. And so very high degrees of sharpness and contrast, center, mid-frame, and even out to the corners. And stopping down, you get a little bit of an increase of contrast in the center and the mid-frame, a little bit more in the corners. But basically after f2.8, there's not a whole lot more to realize anywhere but in the corners. F4, F5.6 gives you amazing detail across the frame. That's also true, though, to a large degree, even at f2. So very strong sharpness. However, I also feel like the bokeh quality is quite good. As you can see with the aperture, the geometry is pretty good. Actually, the physical geometry is good. The only way that it's marred at all is actually due to that pincushion distortion, which gives a little bit of a stretching type look to some things in the corner. But the bokeh circles are nice and round, not overly busy, and that nice aperture shape is retained as you stop the lens down due to 9 rounded aperture blades. Though this isn't the best time of year for getting bokeh type shots, snow is a little bit bright and draws the eye too much. Nonetheless, I did feel like the bokeh quality is very nice, and I think that Sigma has really found a nice balance here between sharpness and then also having a very nice overall rendering. And I can just tell that images look good from the lens, and so image quality I think is definitely a strength, and it does fairly good when pointing into the sun, also with a decent flare resistance here. So overall, high marks optically. So at the end of the day, for a lens that is $699, $700 US, it's not an inexpensive lens. It's not an expensive lens in a relative sense either. It's not going to have a whole lot of competitors, obviously, at this particular focal length, with both 50 and 85 millimeters being the popular focal lengths that frame this. Some of you may find, however, that this strikes a nice balance between those two focal lengths and may give you the angle of view that you really like. if you think 65 millimeters will work for you, there's no other reason that I can think of to not recommend this lens. I think it's beautifully built, has great autofocus, has great image quality, and it is nice and compact, which is not something we can say about many lenses, and of course can't say about many Sigma lenses. And so kudos to Sigma for, I believe, creating a series that's going to appeal to a lot of people who would prefer a compact lens that is still optically sound rather than a massive lens that has all the optical corrections and a larger maximum aperture. And so if that happens to be you, good news, this is a lens I think that you will love. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you'll look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my full text review, also a link to the image gallery so you can look at these photos in a little more detail. There's also buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself, though as always note with these brand new lenses, some retailers may still be populating their listings, so it may take a while before they are usable. There's also linkage there to follow me on social media or to become a patron, to sign up for my newsletter that comes out every Thursday. And of course, beyond that, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button and click that bell to get notifications to make sure you're aware of when new content drops. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.